Right now, you might be surrounded by people, a full office, a crowded subway car, an apartment building with 30 families stacked on top of each other, a phone with 200 contacts and 4 different apps designed specifically to connect you to other human beings. And you still feel it. That specific hollow feeling that has no clean explanation. Not sadness exactly, not depression exactly. Just the quiet sense that nobody really knows you, that you could disappear for 3 days and the world would keep moving without noticing. If you felt that, you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not failing at being a person. You are experiencing something that your biology was never designed to handle. Because for 300,000 years, what you're feeling right now was impossible, not rare, not uncommon, structurally impossible. The conditions that produce modern loneliness simply did not exist for the vast majority of human history. And when you understand what ancient humans actually had instead, something shifts. Because the problem isn't that humans got weaker. It's that we dismantled piece by piece almost every single system our species built to make sure no one ever had to feel this way. So, what did they actually have? Let's start with the number, 25. That is the average size of a hunter-gatherer band, 25 to 50 people, depending on the region, the season, the terrain. Every single one of them known to you completely, not as a profile, not as a username, not as someone you nod at in the hallway. Known. You knew their voice in the dark. You knew which one snored. You knew who had lost a child last winter and was still carrying it. You knew who was funny when the hunting went badly and who went quiet. You knew who to go to when something was wrong and who to avoid when they hadn't slept. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying the relationship between primate brain size and social group size. His conclusion, now called Dunbar's number, was that the human brain evolved specifically to manage relationships with roughly 150 people, not to scroll past thousands of strangers, not to maintain parasocial relationships with people on a screen, to deeply, functionally know 150 individuals. In a hunter-gatherer band, you knew all 25 of them at a depth most modern Americans never reach with a single person. There was no such thing as being unknown. You were seen every single day by people who had known you your entire life. Your grandmother slept a few feet from your children. The man who hunted beside you had watched you learn to walk. The woman who gathered with your mother had been there the night you were born. You could not disappear, not because anyone was watching you, because you were woven into the fabric of daily life so completely that your absence would have been felt the way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue. Immediately. Constantly. Impossible to ignore. That is not surveillance. That is belonging. And modern humans have almost no idea what it actually feels like. But it wasn't just about being known. It was about being touched. This is the part Americans especially don't talk about. Because somewhere in the last century, casual physical touch between adults became strange, loaded, something that requires explanation. It was not always this way. Hunter-gatherer communities were in near constant physical contact, not romantic contact, not sexual contact, just the ordinary daily physical presence of other human bodies. Co-sleeping was universal, not just parents and children. Adults slept in proximity to other adults, in small shelters, around shared fires, bodies close enough to feel warmth. Grooming happened every day. Sitting with someone and picking through their hair sounds strange to modern ears. But for every primate that has ever existed, including humans, mutual grooming is one of the primary mechanisms through which social bonds are formed and maintained. It releases oxytocin. It lowers cortisol. It signals at a neurological level that you are safe, that someone is here, that you are not alone. UCLA researcher Shelley Taylor identified what she called the tend and befriend response. When humans experience stress or social pain, the nervous system drives us toward physical proximity with trusted others. We are neurologically wired at a hardware level to seek closeness when we are hurting. Your body still does this, right now. When you are lonely, something in you reaches for physical contact, a hug, a hand on your shoulder, someone sitting close enough that you can feel they are real. Ancient humans followed that pull every single time because the people were always there. A 2021 survey by Ipsos found that the average American adult goes 3 days between meaningful physical contact with another person. 3 days. Your nervous system was built to never go 3 hours. Then there was the fire. Every night, without exception, the group gathered, not for any special occasion, not because someone planned it, because the fire was there, the dark was outside, and everyone came. You didn't have to decide to show up. Showing up was just what the night looked like. Anthropologist Pauli Wiesner spent years documenting conversations among the Ju-Hoanzi Bushmen of the Kalahari, one of the last groups still living something close to the original human lifestyle. She found that daytime conversation was mostly practical. Who's hunting where? What's ready to gather? Logistics. But at night, around the fire, everything changed. 81% of nighttime conversation was stories, not information exchange, not problem solving. Stories about people in distant places, about things that happened years ago, about why the world is the way it is. Jokes that made the whole camp laugh at once. Wiesner argued that the campfire was where human culture was literally born, but there's something she documented that gets less attention. The fire also meant that loneliness had nowhere to live. You could not go home and close a door. There were no doors. You could not retreat into a private space and sit with your pain alone in the dark. The group was the space. The fire was the center. And when someone in the group was struggling, the whole group knew it. Not because anyone announced it, because in a circle of 25 people who have known each other their whole lives, suffering is visible. You didn't have to say you were lonely. You didn't have to text someone and wait to see if they'd respond. You didn't have to perform okayness in front of people who weren't really paying attention anyway. You just sat down at the fire, and the fire was always lit. Here's what modern science confirmed about all of this. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General released an advisory that called loneliness a public health epidemic. Not a personal failing, not a mood. An epidemic with measurable consequences identical to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Increased risk of heart disease, stroke, dementia, early death. The same year, a meta-analysis published in JAMA Psychiatry found that social isolation was among the strongest predictors of depression and anxiety in the developed world. Stronger than financial stress. Stronger than physical illness. And here is the part that should stop you cold. We are the most connected generation of humans in the history of the species. More communication tools than any humans have ever had. More ways to reach people. More platforms, more apps, more infrastructure designed specifically to eliminate the distance between human beings. And we are the loneliest humans who have ever lived. Because what we built is not what the body needed. The body needed the fire. It needed the 25 people who knew your name since birth. It needed the grooming and the co-sleeping and the nighttime stories and the grandmother sleeping 3 feet from your children. It needed to be woven into a fabric so completely that disappearing was physically impossible. What we gave it instead was a notification. So, what did ancient humans do when the loneliness still found them? Because it did. Even inside a band of 25, there was grief. There was conflict. There was the specific ache of feeling unseen, even by people who are right beside you. Humans are humans. The emotions were the same. What was different was what happened next. They didn't sit alone with it. Across dozens of hunter-gatherer cultures, anthropologists have documented a pattern so consistent it appears to be universal. When someone in the group was suffering emotionally, the group responded with presence, not advice, not solutions, not a recommendation for a therapist or a self-help book. Just presence. Someone would sit with them, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about something completely unrelated, sometimes singing. Collective singing specifically has been documented across virtually every traditional human culture on Earth. And researchers studying it have found that it does something individual singing does not. It synchronizes breathing between people. It releases endorphins simultaneously across the group. It creates what psychologists call social cohesion through shared physical experience. You felt it with other people's bodies, not just your own. And when the grief was too large for one night, they had ritual, not religion necessarily, ritual in the original sense. A structured, repeated behavior that marked emotional pain as significant, as worthy of the whole group's attention. Mourning practices in traditional cultures lasted not days but months, sometimes years. The loss of one person in a group of 25 was not a private event. It was a collective wound that the collective tended collectively. Modern Americans get 2 weeks of bereavement leave, then the quiet, unstated expectation that you should be getting back to normal. And here is what we actually did to all of it. The tribe became the nuclear family. The nuclear family became the individual. The individual became the phone. It happened faster than evolution can adapt. We went from 25 people who knew us completely to nuclear families in the 1950s to, by 2024, the average American having fewer than 3 close friends. In 1990, that number was closer to 10. We didn't choose this exactly. It happened through 1,000 reasonable decisions. Move for the job, buy the house in the suburb, put up the fence, order delivery instead of going out, watch something instead of talking, work more, sleep less. Repeat. Each individual decision made complete sense. The cumulative result was the systematic destruction of every social structure the human nervous system was built inside of. And then we acted surprised when people started falling apart. Robert Putnam, a Harvard political scientist, spent years documenting the collapse of American social infrastructure in a book called Bowling Alone. His central finding was that between 1950 and 2000, American participation in every form of community organization, civic clubs, church groups, neighborhood associations, casual social gatherings, collapsed by roughly 50%. We didn't just get lonelier, we dismantled the physical structures that made connection unavoidable. The campfire didn't just disappear. We replaced it with a television, then a laptop, then a phone that fits in your pocket and simulates the presence of other humans well enough to satisfy the surface need without ever touching the thing underneath. Your ancestors never had a word for loneliness, not because they were simpler, not because they didn't feel deeply, but because the conditions that produce chronic loneliness the way modern Americans experience it did not exist inside a band of 25 people who gathered every night around a fire that never went out. The feeling you carry is not a character flaw. It is the gap between the social world your nervous system was built for and the one you actually live inside. And the ancient answer was never complicated. It was never expensive. It didn't require an app or a subscription or a therapist, though therapists help and there's no shame in that. It required a fire and the willingness to show up at it, and the understanding that when someone sat down beside you in the dark, you didn't have to say a single word. You were already less alone. That's all it ever took. For 300,000 years, that was enough.